today was a big day as the draw was made for the qualifying tournament for Qatar 2022. All the nations found out who they will have to take on in order to qualify for the showpiece in 2 years' time. England was one of those nations involved in the draw, and looking at the outcome, it's not too bad for Gareth Southgate and the Three Lions. Clearly, their main sticking point will be Poland, but also in the group Hungary. We've got Albania, Andorra, and San Marino. Now, no disrespect to the latter three nations at all, and no disrespect intended. However, Albania, Andorra, and San Marino are three teams that England are expected to beat, and beat convincingly. Then, of course, we've got Hungary, who are a growing force in European football, not only with the qualification of Ferencváros to the Champions League, but also when you look at the national side, they're going to be competing in Euro 2021. They're a nation to watch. But also Poland. The main sticking point for England in this group, in Group I, undoubtedly England's biggest opponent in this group. And I wanted to take a look at the Polish press and see what they make of this fixture. Looking at some of the comments from England fans, a lot of them think it's going to be plain sailing. A lot of them say it's going to be a clean sweep, an easy group. But there are also some who are quite cautious and know that Poland could be a tricky opponent. We're not only talking about here about Robert Lewandowski, but the team as a whole. You know, they were in the top league in the Nations League. If we go back to 2016 European Championships, they were knocked out by Portugal in the quarter-finals. The eventual winners on penalties as well. They did have a terrible 2018 World Cup in Russia, but they're a team to be aware of. And I just wanted to have a look what the Polish press made of this fixture, because obviously there's still a lot of history when it comes to Poland against England. There's a lot of narratives, there's a lot that's gone on in the past, and undoubtedly a lot that will go on in the future, especially ahead of this qualifying campaign ahead of the 2022 World Cup. So let's begin with Super Express, which is one of the national titles, one of the national newspapers in Poland. You can compare it to, I don't know, the Sun or the Daily Mail. They go with a headline saying a hit with England and a stroll in the park with San Marino. So clearly they expect a big occasion for that England game, but obviously they've had a look at the other opponents in the group. They should get rid of San Marino. Although if you look at the past, there has been times where Poland has stuck on San Marino. I think, if I'm right in thinking, it was in the 90s where it was a really close call and they wouldn't have beaten them. So, but this time now, of course, they're much expected to beat San Marino, Andorra, Albania. Hungary will be a bit trickier for them, but as they will be for England. But anyway, they do expect a big game with England, as they say, a hit with England. However, they didn't align Poland's very poor record against England as things stand. Both teams have played each other 19 times, England winning 11 of those, 7 draws, and Poland only getting that one victory during the 1973 World Cup Qualifiers, winning 2-0 in Chorzów. In those qualifiers which Poland went on to win, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on, because there is that one game from 1973 that I really want to touch on, that one of the titles has mentioned, but we'll leave that till last. Another title, we'll go for RMFFM, which is one of the main radio stations, the country's biggest radio stations. On their website, they've pulled up actually a pretty strong article, really interesting article, looking at Poland versus England, looking at some of the narratives behind this game. They also underlined Poland's poor record against England. Specifically, they underlined the goal difference between the two teams over the last 19 games. 30 goals England has scored in this fixture, 11 coming from Poland. They also spoke about the prestigiousness of this game. For them, this is a prestigious fixture, especially when it comes to playing at Wembley. It's a game that the country looks forward to, but there is a reason why this fixture is so prestigious for them. And it's because, and whenever these two nations play, there's always, not always, but most of the time, there's something on the line. Whether it's European, whether it's World Cup qualifiers, the European Championship qualifiers, there's always something on the line. And I've had a look at the stats. There's out of the 19 games, 12 of them have been World Cup qualifiers, and there's a few of them which have been really high-profile games. 4 of them have been European Championship qualifying games, and 1 of them was at a World Cup. So there's always high stakes when it comes to England versus Poland. Always. Most of the time, it's pretty high stakes. They also underlined the game in 2013, the last meeting between these two nations, which England won 2-0 at Wembley, and a really interesting narrative. 2-0 win at Wembley, as I said before. Goal scorers in that game, Wayne Rooney and Steven Gerrard. Now, why is that relevant? Well, first of all, Wayne Rooney now is the manager of Derby County. Who currently plays at Derby County? It's Kamil Jóźwiak and Christian Bielik, two players who could potentially play a role in that Polish team in those 2022 Qatar qualifiers. Steven Gerrard, he was also the goal scorer in that last win over Poland for England. And what relevance has he got? Well, he is the manager of Rangers at the moment, and he took on Lech Poznan in the Europa League, and he's going to play them again soon as the Europa League group stages come to an end. So a couple of really nice narratives that they found there, the website. And the last one, of course, they mentioned 2012. England fans who travel up and down the globe following England will remember the 2012 game really well at Warsaw. It finished 1-1, but the score isn't that relevant. What's relevant was what happened at that game. It was played in Warsaw's National Stadium, which has a roof. On that day, there was torrential rainfall. What did they do? Did they close the roof? Of course they didn't. It's Poland we're talking about here. Of course they didn't close the roof. The pitch became waterlogged. The game had to be postponed until the next day. A lot of England fans obviously had to go back home. Very controversial day. A lot of laughs in the ITV studio, as I remember. I think Roy Keane was in there as well, so I can imagine it was an entertaining studio. It was called it's obviously the Warsaw National Stadium. It became as the Warsaw National Swimming Pool in Poland. It was a huge embarrassment. A stadium with a roof, trying to protect, the point. What's the point of a roof? It's to protect events like these, and it's a rainy day, torrential rain. Do they close the roof? Of course they don't. National embarrassment, and they do come back to that RMFFM. Credit to them for that, because I don't think I'll ever forget that day, and I'm sure a lot of England fans who had to either extend their stay in Warsaw or go back home, they won't forget that. So that was an interesting one. A piece from Sports Dziennik, another national sports newspaper. They just gave a brief overview, and funny enough, they sort of missed out England. I think one of the journalists must have been busy, he just had to type something up, and he missed England. He mentioned Hungary, Albania, Andorra, San Marino, but he didn't say Poland will be playing England. So I'm sure it's just an error. A bit embarrassing though. When you type in something up for a national, a national title online story. And it's such a prestigious fixture of different titles, point out, to miss them out, a bit disappointing. I'm not going to lie, but working in the industry, I know sometimes things like that happen, and is a bit embarrassing. We just got to get on with it. The final title I wanted to bring your attention to is Przegląd Sportowy, arguably the top sports media outlet in Poland. A national paper that focuses just on sport, which you don't really have that in the UK. We've got a Football League paper, but that obviously focuses on football. We've got the Rugby League Express, but obviously that focuses on Rugby League. But this is a title that's concentrating on all sports, and it's a national title, so it's an interesting paper. They go with an interview with Zbigniew Boniek. Now, hardcore football fans will remember Zbigniew Boniek, a quality player in the 70s and 80s, obviously Juventus forward, scored a ton of goals. He is the president of the Polish FA. He won't be the president when most of these Qatar 2022 qualifying games take place, because his time is nearly up. But he did an interview basically saying a third place in this group would be an utter defeat. So clearly he has got his eyes on the top two places, if not first, then at least a second place and a chance to qualify through the playoffs. He also went on to say that games with San Marino are the only relatively quiet ones that he, from his perspective, which is an interesting thing to say, considering that you also have Andorra in your group and the likes of Albania, which Poland, no disrespect to Albania of course, but Poland should be beating them home and away. Nevertheless, he only points out San Marino as the only two comfortable ties he sees in this group. Another piece on that website for Przegląd Sportowy is an interview with Jan Tomaszewski. Football fans who were watching England in the 70s will remember him as the clown, as Brian Clough famously described him. It was an interview with him looking back at 1973 when Poland drew 1-1 at Wembley against England in the final game of the World Cup Qualifiers for the 1974 World Cup, and the 1-1 draw essentially meant that Poland went through and England missed out. That was the first time that England missed out on a World Cup since they started playing in World Cups in 1950. and it's an infamous game because England, they had to win that game. And they battered Poland. I can't remember the stats on the top of my head, but it was something like 36 shots, around 30 corners, ridiculous. Twice they hit the woodwork. It was incredible. But Jan Tomaszewski, the Polish goalkeeper, he just came up with the saves. He came up denying England, and nobody to this day knows how England didn't win that game. Alf Ramsey's men were so dominant. How they didn't win it is still beyond everybody. Jan Tomaszewski goes on to say that it was fear. He was feeling fear ahead of that game, but it was that feeling of fear which drove him to put on that performance, that match-winning performance. And I know it was 1-1, but that game to this day is described as a win. And the comedy sketches that I've seen are coming from Poland. I do watch a lot of comedy there, and there was one of them that say a comedy sketch in which there's two guys thinking about football and say, yeah, I remember when Poland beat England at Wembley 2-1. So jokes like that come up 2-1, 1-1. So that jokes like that come up all the time in the Polish culture. Still a very famous game, and it's nice for the publication to go back to revisit that game. And I'm sure there'll be many more memories and analysis. Looking forward to this game because let's face it, in Group I, this is the game to watch. Poland-England, two very exciting games. One at Wembley, the other one I presume is going to be in Warsaw. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be good. Let's also not count out Hungary because that'll be an interesting player in this group. But England will no doubt be the favourites. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.